Today's episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm with over 20 years of experience.
Greenman Open is a European long-term investment fund, or LTIF. It's focused on grocery-anchored retail real estate. These are the kinds of properties that some investors believe remain essential even in uncertain markets. People still need to buy food. That's what they say makes this sector more resilient and more stable over the long term.
Unlike many alternative investment funds that are only available to professionals, Greenman Open is open to a wide range of investors with lower minimum investments and a highly regulated structure.
Just remember, all investments carry risk. Values can go up or down, and past performance isn't a reliable guide to future returns. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but you should always speak to a financial advisor before investing. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Hello and welcome to our Bank Holiday Weekend edition of Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
We're doing things a little bit differently this weekend. We're not looking back over the stories of the week because not only are many of the politicians on holidays, but Ivan's been on holidays as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the scores on the board. We're going to start assessing the performance of this government over the last 6 months or so, the individual ministers, also some of the junior ministers who've caught Ivan's eye, and we'll have a look as well at the opposition politicians who have been doing their job the best. So that's what we're going to be doing for you in today's edition. So let's start with the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin. What's your assessment of how he has performed, Ivan?
Well, I think that he had a very good general election. I thought, if we compare it over the last 12 months as opposed to just the last 7 months, I think it was his most successful ever election. He took over the party in 2011. I think this is his fourth general election and by far his best. I think he was the most authoritative figure up against the kind of youthful Simon Harris, and we'll say more kind of barnstorming Mary Lou and pugnacious. He was kind of, I think, in tune with the mood of the country, like steady as she goes, the economy is doing well, and so on. I think then that he rapidly asserted his own authority in the party and did a quick deal with Simon Harris, which allowed them to collectively negotiate with the regional independents. So I think his post-election period was really good from November to the 23rd of January when he was eventually elected Taoiseach. I think he made a serious error of judgment in underestimating the speaking rights row. There was a very simple solution to what was a very avoidable months of attrition, which was to say, look, this is a government now with a 17, 18-seat majority. We need to look at each Dáil has its own speaking arrangements. So for the 34th Dáil, there are actually a lot of individual TDs who are now government backbenchers, and they should be given speaking rights and maybe committee rights and so on. And if he had said, look, they're going to be designated as government backbenchers in the way the Greens were backbenchers, but we want to give them a little bit more time and a little bit more opportunity. They were elected by people across the 43 constituencies, same as anyone else. Instead, he kind of then doubled down on, when it was a row, he kind of said F you to the opposition, and he was tone deaf to it. He was certainly not going to back down. He was at maximum authority. And I kind of felt the holding up of the committees, the bad, really attritional nature of the Dáil chamber set a bad tone for the 34th Dáil. And I felt all of that with a little bit of common sense and foresight could have been avoided. So that was his worst moment. Now we're moving into an era whereby some of his appointments, I think, do raise questions.
That's what I was going to bring up. That would have been my major issue with him. And just going back, you said that he maybe performed best in the general election campaign. There is an argument that Mary Lou McDonald was the best performing leader of the general election campaign in that she managed to salvage for Sinn Féin a percentage share of the vote, which all the opinion polls on the European and local elections previously had said she wouldn't. Now, I'm aware that I have said I still think it was something of a failure for Sinn Féin, given that they were down significantly on their share in the previous general election. But if it hadn't been for her performance in the election campaign, it could have been worse. The point you make, that you just started to raise about Micheál Martin on the appointment of selections for ministers, I think is one of the things that will be we should look at. I mean, particularly in relation to housing. He did the right thing in belatedly deciding to get rid of Darragh O'Brien, because I think one of the main things that has been held over this government since it came into office has been its extraordinary failure on housing. And we spoke on a recent edition of Path to Power about the commencement numbers and how that has actually gone so badly in 2025 in the midst of a housing crisis. But this government has in some respect been hamstrung already by the realisation that it, and I'll use the word fibbed about how many completions there were going to be last year as part of the election campaign. And he put in as a replacement for Darragh O'Brien somebody who doesn't look like he's particularly strong or authoritative in the face of James Browne, which also led to the other one of the big problems for the government, which is the appointment of the housing czar, which was so badly botched, and the whole row about whether Brendan McDonald would go into the position and how much he would be paid for going into that position. Everything in housing has not gone well. And we spoke at the outset of this government about the belief that Micheál Martin was going to make housing the central issue for him in this term as Taoiseach. And if it was, well, we haven't seen sign of it. And I think the housing has been, and we'll get to James Browne in a little while, has been the biggest single failure.
Yeah, and also it's the biggest challenge that they face. Look, the world and his wife was led to believe by Darragh O'Brien that we were on a trajectory to go from 18,000 to 30,000 last year to 23 to 40,000. The rebate scheme on the water development charges and planning fees meant that the actual commencement orders went up to 54,000, and there was some basis for that. What actually transpired has really hung like a shadow over this government. Can this crowd be believed in housing? Do they actually have what it takes to resolve the issue? And all of that was pretty disastrous. And there was a kind of a feeling, we only found out about this till after the polls closed. I left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths.
Because everyone knows that's not true.
Well, put it like this. The evidence was there from the CSO and the ESRI that it was in trouble.
We were highlighting it. There were economists were highlighting it. Journalists like Ian Guider are regularly highlighting it, that they weren't going to get to the 40,000 figure. And yet, I suppose you can say it's a weakness of the opposition that they weren't able to hammer away and point out that this was a fraudulent claim that was been made.
For me, so that's water under the bridge, and it's a real black mark. For me, it's actually quite easy to make spending decisions about housing. It's actually quite easy to make a lot of soft decisions about it. I'll believe them on housing when I see them making the tough decisions on planning, because the tough decisions is taking on judicial reviews, giving exemptions for national infrastructure, simply doing away with rounds of consultation. And we all know, if you look at, the Dundrum Centre, there was thousands of objectors, Clonlift, thousands of... So the point is this is not popular. Are they going to take the tough decisions as opposed to spending the money?
And just a couple of other things about Micheál Martin, and we might get back to it. He's made Gaza a major issue. I think he's in tune with what people around the country feel, the horrors of what is happening in Gaza, and has not been afraid to call out Israel for it. I think a lot of that has been motivated by the fact that he has gone there and he has seen things for himself and has been utterly shocked by it. But again, you actually have to wonder, is the Occupied Territories Bill the right response, in that it gives very little benefit to the people of Palestine? It's a symbolic gesture. How much weight will it actually carry, and will it do damage to Ireland's economic interests? And those are legitimate points that have to be brought up. He's also demonstrated, I think, in the Dáil at times, a fairly thin skin he allows Sinn Féin to get under his skin and to heckle him, and I'm not sure that's necessarily always a good look. But you would like him to see, maybe to show a little bit more positive passion. And I'm going to give an example of something from, and you'll start laughing at me now in relation to this, and I'm still in the grieving process for the All-Ireland Senior Hurling Final. But on the night of the game, we were at the One Cork Foundation had the after-match banquet in the Clayton Burlington, and I was the MC for the night, as you know. So Micheál Martin was one of the people that I had to introduce, and he got up and he made a barnstorming speech in defence of Cork, and and saying 35 minutes would not define the people of the team and all the rest of it. And the crowd was cheering him. And a lot of people were saying to me afterwards, geez, we'd like to hear a lot more of Micheál Martin like that. And even I've actually said it to him. I said afterwards, geez, I'd love to hear you've been having that passion a bit more about things in relation to the politics rather than Cork. He sort of looked to me. I'm not sure he necessarily appreciated me saying that. And he probably would, if he hears about this podcast, because he says he doesn't listen to it.
He says his son Michael A listens to it.
Exactly. So anyway, he might disagree with that. But so I think overall, I think people find him a very decent individual and well-meaning individual, and that is a strength for the government. But there are different things. So I suppose I would give him a 6 or 7 out of 10 so far. What would you give him?
What I would give him 7. But what I would say is this, that everything is in context. He is the longest serving leader of Fianna Fáil, bar Dev, much longer than Bertie, much longer than a couple of them put together. You're always at a time and point and a changing context. Like the flashing signal of exit stage left is November 27, right? That is when he comes to the end of his term as Taoiseach. Would he really take on the critical point then of leading Fianna Fáil into a 5th general election? Would he really take on the diminished role of Tánaiste? So I actually think he needs to show a lot more urgency, because you know the way they talk about US presidents when you're, particularly if you have a bad midterm and you're a lame duck, it won't be too long. Right? I certainly think around the time of the EU presidency will be his high point, that he will eventually become a lame duck. That's the nature of Anno Domini and so on. He needs to show more urgency.
Urgency, I'm glad you used that word again, because I picked up on it, because that's where I want to go to Simon Harris. He's had to rein in the urgency to a certain extent, hasn't he? It's been a difficult, I think, transition, hasn't it, from Simon Harris, who had been a minister but not Tánaiste before he became Taoiseach, who clearly loved being Taoiseach, and then finds himself back in the Tánaiste's role, having to wait for another 2 years before he gets a go to be Taoiseach again. And there have been times I wonder, how committed he is to being a team player in the government, but then also he has to maintain Fine Gael's identity. And I suppose he may feel that he's had a couple of successes in that regard, in such as being seen to be the one who shot down the housing czar. He also has showed a very sort of independent or Fine Gael position in relation to the student fees and whatever. But I just wonder how he's going to manage that balance. And I think that's going to become very much a bigger issue later in the year when it comes to budget time. Particularly when they look to remove the cost of living increases, because I know at the moment he's making a big deal of himself and Micheál Martin being at one, that they will not repeat those cost of living increases, the 2.2 billion in the budget of the one-off payments. But I wonder, will he, when push comes to shove and the heat gets turned up around budget time, will he hold the line on that fiscal responsibility?
So, first of all, I think Simon Harris had a good election. Everyone talks about Can Turk and he imploded. I didn't see that. He got 23 newbies elected. I think FG under Leo was facing Armageddon, and he absolutely energised it, and he deserves enormous credit for that. I think also he did conduct the post-election negotiations well, and put it like this, I thought he was maturing well. The thing that surprises me about Simon Harris is the number of diehard blue shirts. They still talk to me. People who for 40 years have supported the party and would have a certain amount of political experience and wisdom. And they are potentially his closest supporters, but they're most critical of him. And what do they say? They say that he's too populist, he's too short-termism, and that he lacks substance. Those are the three charges that I hear about him. And put it like this, that ain't new, Simon. So I'm wondering, what are you going to do about that? So the freshness and the zeal and the TikTok, tish, and all that kind of stuff was fine. I think he is facing a situation whereby those 23 newcomers will eventually find their feet and find their voice, and they mightn't be as grateful to him. I actually have been, because we'll come to discuss her, his potential protagonist against him. Like Micheál Martin has no protagonist against him. He's got no internal strife whatsoever. There are no issues. The sore heads of John McGuinness, Mark McSherry have all melted. Even Jim O'Callaghan have melted into like snow in a ditch. So Jennifer
Carroll
MacNeill has not really made the impression that I thought she wanted to make. She's very low profile. She's kept away from CHI, NCH. Like, she's doing something about the 7-day week thing.
Sorry, is that not what you do in Angola, that you avoid the landmines?
And so that's obviously her strategy. But the point is this, she's not projecting herself as, an alternative Taoiseach in waiting.
Is she doing the groundwork with the Fine Gael parliamentary party?
She could be.
With the voters in the party?
The point is this, if there is no actual person to take the crown from Simon between now and November 27, then he will be Taoiseach, and that looks fairly straightforward. So what I would say is this, the question is, what does Simon Harris really stand for? Like, I think he's become something of a commentator on both Gaza and on Trump.
Very likely Varadkar was a commentator in chief.
That is only highlighting your own kind of ineffectiveness. Well, someone else in Brussels is going to decide the tariff rate, or Washington is going to decide it.
Yeah.
Like, why put so much political capital into something that, whereas if he picked something that, like, even take student fees, you could say he maybe had an impact on it. But like, at the end of the day, what does he really believe in politics? What does he want to achieve by the end of his political career? And people are saying it's a bit of a blank page.
Has he also perhaps erred a little bit in providing a running commentary on Trump and the tariffs?
Oh, that's driving people insane.
I mean, and I say this, he hasn't done an interview with me on the radio at the time of recording this podcast since the election.
You can probably blame me for that. The contagion.
His people have told me he hasn't done any of the drive time radio programmes, right? Okay. They don't matter anyway. But I suppose the point is that I shouldn't even be saying this, because it gives them an excuse not to do an interview with me. But there have been times I've thought during the whole Trump tariff thing is that he's been a little bit too eager maybe to talk about what he can't control. And that only then emphasises that he's actually acting as a commentator.
I actually think if he says, look, whatever will be, we need to improve our competitiveness, we need to improve our productivity across the country in terms of infrastructure and delivery, I think that's much safer ground than scaring the life out of people that we're going to be in a recession this time next year.
So what's your score from?
6.
Okay, I'll probably go with about the same on that. What about Prudent Paschal? Because this is Prudent Paschal Donohoe, this is the moniker that he has, which is not borne out by the figures. If you look at the way that expenditure has soared under his watch, both as Minister for Finance and Minister for Public Expenditure, I suspect that if Paschal Donohoe had his way, now I know it was last year, it was Jack Chambers was Minister for Finance who delivered the last budget before the election, but I can only imagine, they do it in tandem with each other. He must have been looking at all of these cost of living measures and saying, okay, politically it's the right thing to do, economically it's not. I wonder, will Paschal Donohoe finally be prudent, as we say, given what you said on this podcast a couple of weeks ago about the looming recession, which went down very strongly with a lot of people I was talking to subsequently. Will he be tempted to rein in the current spending while increasing the capital spending which is needed, mindful of what's going on with the multinational tax base and all the rest of it? I wonder, will we see really finally maybe the true Paschal come out?
Well, first of all, Paschal is now the kind of quintessential safe pair of hands. He's seen as more like department officials in the Department of Finance than department officials themselves. He's become institutionalised. He's there so long. But
does that mean he's deeply conservative?
No, well, but put it like this. He comes from a corporate background. I think Paschal's stock is steady, is flatlining at a 7-8, insofar as he is definitely seen as someone who can be trusted to say no to people. The other thing, I spoke about...
apparently in private, I mean, we all know the persona of Paschal Donohoe in his media interviews, but apparently when it's in private stuff and if people are coming to him looking for money, he can be quite tough, apparently.
Yeah. And
quite sharp with people.
When I was filling in for Pat, I said to him, let me tell you what people are saying behind your back. And it's the housing sector saying, you're strangling all these private-public partnerships, you're strangling the cost rental, you're strangling affordability because you care more about not having the Troika back in this. And he turned around to me and said, oh, don't worry, Evan, they're saying it to my face. Which I found kind of disarming, that I wasn't telling him anything he didn't know already. Put it like this. What I spoke about... Simon being a bit of a kind of jumping jack and on every issue and a bit populist, Paschal has the right media management. He comes out when he's something to say. It's seen to be deliberate. It's usually maybe around exchequer returns or something, and he's understated and he has an economy of sentences, and he has this great communication skill, which is he repeats the question, analyses the question, comments on the question, and then gives you a neutral answer. But he's perfected that, so he's deeply skilled. He got the Eurogroup again, which I think on a standalone basis for an Irish guy to see off, there's 20 states in the Eurozone, right? And that's heavy hitters, Germany, France and so on. I wouldn't underestimate that. Personally, he could have, the way we spoke about Leo and opportunities and Simon Coveney, I actually think Paschal is going to be in demand for a top job after this, but I don't see him going back to deeper. So I see this whole government that it will change in November 2027, and I think he'll be looking for the exit door after that.
So then what about, you said 7 or 8 score for him, is it?
Yeah, I know. I think he put it like this, he adds credibility to the government.
Okay.
So what do you give him?
I give him about 7. What about Jack Chambers? Because Jack Chambers, Minister for Public Expenditure, having been promoted to Deputy Leader of Fianna Fáil and been put into the Department of Finance without having any background in finance. I mean, he's a qualified medical doctor like Leo Varadkar was. I feel it took him a little bit of time to find his feet. I think he's clearly a very bright guy who had to learn his way in relation to it. Now in the Department of Public Expenditure, he would appear to be Micheál Martin's anointed one, although I have a suspicion that he was put in to look like that, but also to be told, you're young yet, bide your time and the rest of it. And also, I think Jack Chambers has one impediment, and that is, and I say this, and this again, I hope it won't impact on my ability to get him to join me on the programme for interviews.
Well, you're becoming a brown noser as this podcast goes on.
No, that's so far from it. I'm going to say is that his delivery can be quite monotone and boring. And that he actually, if he's going to be a leader of Fianna Fáil and if he's going to be a Taoiseach in the future, he needs to be a little bit more animated than he actually is. It's all very flat, monotone, one tone.
So I've actually done quite a lot of gigs with Jack there, and I find him very accessible. And I would say that I actually think he's one of the most personable ministers.
Oh, he's very personable.
I actually like his company.
Yeah, you can chat away to him.
In private, he'll tell you, oh, it's ridiculous about the civil servants or whatever. So,
Does he need to show more of that maybe in his public performances?
Well, put it like this, I think he wants to be safe and be seen to be responsible. So his big ticket at what he's saying at all these conferences, give me 1 year and wait till you see this infrastructure task force that I've set up with Sean O'Driscoll and Fergal O'Rourke and all the heavy hitters in Airgrid and Irish Water. This is going to get results.
Will it? Because the Housing Commission was supposed to do that, all the heavy hitters and that, and they came forward with all the ideas and it got put on the shelf for the duration of the election, and it's been taken down off the shelf and it's been sort of implemented.
Well, no, let's be clear. Until they do things like the judicial reviews we spoke about recently, like the Part 8. Part 8 means the local authority, the LDA, is the person given the plan permission is the person applying for the plan. You have extra powers, right? So, and so therefore, I'll believe it when I see those roadblocks removed as well as the money thing. On Jack, you're absolutely right. I was in Doheny Nesbitt's the other night, and this backbencher came up to me, and various backbenchers had come up to me, and I asked them the only question down, who's the next Fianna Fáil leader? Because I want some intel and some insight. And they increasingly tell me that both junior ministers who want to be senior ministers and backbenchers who want to be junior ministers, they've only one question for the next leader, which is, how are you going to secure my job? So just say the combined total of FFFG goes down. They want to know, where do you stand on the national question, which is, would you get into government with Sinn Féin, FFSF? And the truth of the matter is, the kind of guy they're gravitating towards as someone who's kind of up for that, keep me in my job, get me my job. How are we going to be in government again? We're on our second term. Where will we get our third term? And Darragh O'Brien comes back into that frame of someone just being a political heavyweight, and we'll come to his Ministry of Performance. Whereas Jack, I'm afraid to say, they regard him as a bit of a chap. They regard him as a bit of a youngster, a bit of a kind of novice. And the second thing they say is that, and I actually don't find this in private, but they say he has the personality of a cardboard box, that he has no charisma and so on. Now, put it like this, I would say with Jack, in fairness to him, unlike people like Jim O'Callaghan who are roaring forward, right? Jack is in the standstill position, but he should be in his prime. He's in a top job. He's deputy leader of the party. He did director of elections for both the locals, Europeans, and the general election. He did a good job on those, and he didn't overstretch or overstate himself. So put it like this, he has a lot of good tendencies. He's in Dublin, which is a plus point, but he just, to put it like this, he just lacks a little X factor.
We need to take a break, and I have to tell you, Ivan, I'm not sure we're going to get through the entire cabinet and the opposition and all the rest of it.
Some of those you can flick through.
But there are some of them we get through.
Some of the nondescript ones, I can give you just one sentence.
Which we will get to when we come back after this break.
This episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm. Greenman Open focuses on investing in grocery-anchored retail real estate, designed to generate stable, long-term income. The fund is managed in Ireland. Learn more on the website greenmanopen.com.
Now, before making any investment, it's important to understand the risks. Investments could go up or down, and past performance is not a reliable guide to future results. Greenman Open is a regulated LTIF, but like all investments, it carries risks. You should always seek advice from a financial professional before investing. Welcome back to Path to Power. We're doing our scores on the doors. What score did we give Jack Chambers, actually?
I put it like this. The next year will tell. He's make or break for him. I give him a 7.
Okay, right. I'd say 6. I'm actually going to give John Lee of the Irish Mail on Sunday a little bit of credit for this idea. He did a recent piece where he assessed all of them. So I have that open in front of me just to see the list of where he went. He went next to Helen McEntee, who is actually, when I was looking at Minister for Education and Youth, she's certainly not in the firing line in the way that she was as Minister for Justice. There haven't been all of the crises that she endured as Minister for Justice. But what exactly has she actually done as Minister for Education?
Well, she's polite. She doesn't make a mistake. She won't offend the unions. She won't offend, like education is riddled with vested interests. She's not going to upset other. So I give her a 5 out of 10. I would have given her less for that in justice. I think she's more suited to education. In fairness, in justice, she did something on domestic violence, which was fair play to her. But in terms of morale in An Garda Síochána, prison numbers are like pretty poor. The one thing I will say about Helen McEntee, and I'm going to have a bit of a swipe here, Holly Cairns has taken maternity leave of a year. Helen McEntee took much shorter maternity leave. As a political party leader, I actually think it's a lack of seriousness by the Soc Dems by the length of her maternity leave.
Oh, well, actually, it isn't a year. It's only 6 months with Holly Cairns at this stage anyway. And, you know...
But she never says anything about anything. Like, you could actually dial it in, some of the stuff. You know what I mean? You don't have to be present, you know what I mean, out of West Cork all the time. But she's actually disappeared for 12 months.
Well, look, no, she hasn't disappeared for 12 months.
Well, have you seen any statement from her?
Sorry, she had the baby in November, right, election time. We're only at the start of August.
How long did Helen McEntee take for maternity leave?
Every woman's situation is different, and you have to respect the decisions that they have to make.
But I'm a hardened political animal.
Yeah, I know, but you see, maybe life has changed in the 21st century, Ivan, okay? So let's just wait and see what happens in September. And you know, we've been giving out about people who have an opinion, commentator-in-chief and everything. You know, she has delegated to her deputy, Cian O'Callaghan, and let him get on with it. And it's not that important that she's seen to be making a statement on everything or anything at this stage.
Look, your woke credentials are fine. Don't worry about that.
Anyway, sorry.
I won't drag you down.
And I will give John Lee credit again for just making the issue in relation to Helen McEntee. You know, she has promised to force the educational religious institutions to pay victims for the historic child abuse.
No, she kicked that into a 5-year touch.
Yeah, well...
No, please, I wouldn't say that's her finest hour.
No, he wasn't saying that, because he was saying that the idea that they will pay up, if you look at what they've done in previous reports, they've actually...
No, but it's an aspiration that they'll go after them. There's no CAB legislation.
But I'll give you another line on this, just something different, that I was actually... The day of the match between Cork and Tipperary, God help us. Anyway, I was in the Flowing Tide pub beforehand, down near the Abbey, and was with a few friends. And as I was leaving, a guy just called me over to say hello and to give out about you. And podcast listener, there were quite a few of them who I met on All Ireland.
I'm surprised you give them the time of day. I just say I'm in a hurry.
Oh, Ivan, you can't be like that. Jesus. Anyway, I started chatting to this fella who, as it turns out, he was behind me in the North Mon in Cork, and so were all the other lads at the table. And the conversation was only about a 3 or 4 minute conversation, because a few of the lads were waiting for me outside, sort of, will you come on? But they very quickly started talking about the Mon, where we all went to school. And I just asked them what years had they come out. I think he was a year after me. The other 2 lads were 3 or 4 years. And they suddenly started talking about some of the teachers. And they started talking about the physical abuse that we actually endured at the hands of various teachers. And I was thinking about it afterwards, and it struck me, you know, that... And there were also people we knew who were the victims of child sexual abuse. And indeed, my English teacher in first and second year was transferred to Wexford. And only about 30 years later did the state catch up with him, and he was imprisoned for child sex abuse down in Wexford in the early 1980s. And all of that's very important to remember and to deal with and the rest of it. But then it struck me, like, you know, there was an awful lot of other abuse. It wasn't sexual abuse, it was physical abuse that people still live with. And the fact that these lads were bringing it up when they were chatting to me, I thought was significant. And then part of me started thinking as well, like, you know, that, you know, there is a big cost involved in doing these investigations. And if that falls on the state rather than actually coming from the institutions who failed to pony up, that is money that can be spent on current day education as well. You know, and I'm not in any way diminishing, and Jesus, I would not in any way diminish what has been suffered by people in relation to the hands of those who educated them in the past. But unless you make sure that those responsible pay up the money rather than state having to foot the bill again, then the state loses money that it could be applying to the
redress is the big issue for yeah. So,
who's your next minister?
So we'll put it.
Let's talk about Darragh O'Brien, because you brought him up there.
Darragh O'Brien.
Talking him up again as the future Fianna Fáil leader. Okay,
5 out of 10. He's done something on LNG. He's done something on private wires, but it's actually going to be a lag time. Put it like this, I actually think the Department of Transport, Department of Energy are 2 really mega infrastructure utility departments. I actually think Eamon Ryan was a bit of a disaster. He talked a great game, renewables and all the rest of it. It actually went backwards under his time.
Will Darragh O'Brien just talk a great game? Will he sort out Dublin Airport, or will he be hamstrung by the fact that it's in his constituency?
Well, put it like this, I think the jury is out on Darragh insofar as that if he doesn't deliver, like his USP is he's pragmatic. People like that about him. He's a good listener, he's pragmatic. But is he delivering? That's the question.
Isn't that the problem with this entire government? Could we almost not just sum up all of these ministers by saying, what are they actually delivering? I mean, many of them seem to have just gone in and said, oh, give me time, I'm trying to learn about what's involved in this. As if they're a brand new government that's come in, you got to give me time to learn about it. But are they actually doing anything that we can actually say, well, yes, that's a major change or a major improvement that's been brought about? Or is it all the usual thing, a sort of promises, we'll do this, we'll do that, and then not being able to implement them?
Well, I actually think, in fairness to ministers, you need a year before you can really pass judgment on them. So Peter Burke, talking a great game, the VAT at 9%, he was kind of wedded to the cross on that one, is going to deliver it. The IDA, he again is in this commentary thing about Trump and tariffs and so on. The jury is out on him. Martin Heydon has got off to a good start. It's a record year for farm incomes. People complained about the price of meat and milk, but there's a good side of that.
The reform of CAP could be very difficult.
Yeah, that could be difficult for him and down the road. Jennifer Carroll MacNeill, a little bit gone missing in action. Yet to see her. The 7-day-a-week roster is a good thing.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
But Bernard Doster would claim that was his thing.
Yeah, but it came a lot of ministerial direction, in fairness.
I'm giving her credit for that. I'm giving her credit for that.
I mean, it's not for her to implement the roster, it's for the HSE to implement the roster. So I think it's...
We haven't mentioned the star performer.
Can we finish on Jennifer Carroll MacNeill first? Okay. I mean, I would assume there again, I think that it's interesting that Robert Watt stayed in the Department of Health with her when, as you revealed, there was a potential for him to be moved to the Department of Housing. My understanding in relation to that is that he was sounded out about it and then the trail went cold, that he would have considered the actual move to it. But, there seems to be, there's not as many crises coming out of the Department of Health, is there? Now, you say that and then suddenly something could actually happen.
CHI was a pretty bad. The scoliosis, the springs, the 1,500 hip operations that shouldn't have happened, the NCH going from bad to worse.
But I suppose what you can say in relation to those, in that those are historical things going back a few years ago, rather than sort of now ongoing day-to-day crises such as in the emergency departments and trolley numbers and stuff like that. Or, they've managed to sort of maybe put a certain degree of a lid in that. But I do appreciate, and you're right, that of this government period, the hospital or the what's been happening in scoliosis and whatever is one of the biggest negatives that this government has actually had to deal with. Anyway, I think we want to see, I think you made reference earlier to about her own political ambitions. I suggested that she might be keeping the head down, dodging the landmines in Angola. But if she does have serious ambitions to usurp Simon Harris, I think we probably will have to wait and see if she becomes more obvious and visible to us all in the near future.
Well, if health is Angola, justice is Beirut in terms of it's another minefield. But Jim O'Callaghan, in the public's eyes and particularly in the media's eyes, has been the star performer in terms of the comparison of, if this is a continuity government. He seems very comfortable in using his legal experience to talk about issues. He did the U-turn on the awards thing. He is more open and attuned to counter opinions within the Garda force and so on. Now, whether he actually does anything, but mostly he's made his name for growling about migration, in terms of that he is not part of what was there with Roderick O'Gorman of, is
that clever and good politics?
Oh, I think it's brilliant politics, because underneath the surface, take it from me, Matt, this is going to be the biggest issue going forward. It's the biggest issue in British politics. Farage is on the case.
Has it not been largely diffused here in Ireland?
Big mistake. Let's put it like this. This numerically is going to get worse, not better. The fact of the matter is the Ukraine situation might get better, but the truth is there are people going to be turfed out of IPAS centres and Ukrainians turfed out as they erode the benefits and so on. And I think there's a bit of a perception, maybe not where you live, but there's a bit of a general perception that our terms and conditions of benefits that are available to migrants are too generous and need to be reined in. And I think underneath, outside of the media world and the politically correct world, there is a simmering resentment about migration. And that is why I think Sinn Féin are not powering ahead in the polls.
I'm laughing when you say where I live. I live within 200 metres of an iPass centre. You live in a country estate many miles away from any.
I won't get into what I live in or where I've seen different things. But the point about it is this, that Jim O'Callaghan has certainly come into the frame as successor to Micheál Martin. That was not conceivable 2 years ago.
Okay, and just sticking with the Fianna Fáil people, there's two more I think we need to talk about. James Lawless in Further and Higher Education, who took a bit of a kicking in relation to pointing out that the reduction in the student contribution fees came out of the once-off cost of living measures. And then Simon Harris making a big issue of this. There was a commitment in the programme to government to actually reducing the fees, which essentially means that when the budget happens in October, based on the promises made by Simon Harris, the fees are going to have to be reduced, but it'll actually become a permanent thing out of the annual ongoing budget rather than out of the cost of living one-off measures. And you sort of wonder what else will be lost in further and higher education to cover for that.
So I don't believe the Department of Further Education should be a department in its own right. I get the point about research. I think it should all be part of education. I think, however, James Lawless shouldn't be judged on the politics of the latest atrocity. I think that civil servants and other people who have met him and encountered him rate him. And I think in 2027, I see him moving to a more senior department. I think medium term, he is on the way up.
What the other Fianna Fáil person is Norma Foley.
And Dara Calleary.
Yes. But sorry, I was just about to say, I've forgotten about Dara Calleary, but is that because he's just so quiet?
Yeah, no, I have to. There's a few 4 out of 10s that just could work harder, could be more visible, could realise that they've a big opportunity now. Dara Calleary has waited his whole life to be a senior minister. Now,
having briefly been one before.
Yeah.
But has that scarred him?
Yeah, well, no. He's in a prime position. He's got the biggest expenditure department.
Social protection, rural development and Gaeltacht. Has he made any of the impact?
Storm Owen, he did.
Yeah, but Hedda Humphreys was always out there and she had views in relation to social protection payments. You were aware of her. We're not aware of Dara Calleary.
So auto-enrolment has been deferred spectacularly over more than a decade. If it comes in on the 1st of January, I will say that will be a further in his cap because it has been long-fingered. But I do think that Norma Foley and Dara Calleary and Patrick O'Donovan could do better. Could be more active.
Norma Foley was far more active, I think, as Minister for Education. Was that perhaps because she was more comfortable with that because of her teaching background, that she understood all of the issues? Now, obviously, children are a major part of life for teachers and all the rest of it, but she doesn't seem to have been as proactive in the role as Minister for Children.
You see, there's a risk, when you get appointed in a continuous sort of consecutive basis as second minister, lethargy can take over. This becomes your new normal, as opposed to, the vigorous new minister trying to make an impression. So I think that applies to some of them. But we have yet to come on.
And we haven't done James Browne.
That's the one I was going to ask you about. What does John Lee say about him?
John Lee gave him a 4 out of 10.
Yeah.
I suppose, and he mentions the Brendan McDonald thing, which we spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
The impression that I get is that James Browne is a very decent individual, but is he out of his depth? Is he actually suited to this? Because remember how when he was appointed to the job, a number of people think he wasn't meant to be the Minister for Housing, that it was a last-minute reshuffle. And then a lot of people said that Micheál Martin had meant to really be the sort of in control of whoever it was to be Minister for Finance or Minister for Housing, but that Micheál Martin has become so busy with other things that he possibly isn't sitting on the Department of Housing in the way that he should.
I think that James Browne was, plunged into the deepest, coldest water. He hadn't really got a background in that sector. He'd never been in opposition. Whereas Darragh O'Brien had been 4 years as housing spokesperson in opposition before he became Minister for Housing for 4 years. I think what he's done on rent pressure zones, planning extensions, the National Planning Framework, the LDA, shows a tendency to be decisive. So all eyes will be on the September package of the successor to Housing for All. I think he's battling against finance not going to sign up to 25 years of differential rents and long-term subsidies to houses. So say if it costs 450,000 to build a unit, they're saying, no, what about the subsidy we're going to have to give? It's $1 million a unit. And he could be collateral damage with finance if the tide goes out. So I think people have, he's too easy just to dump on. He hasn't, beyond doubt, established his credentials. But I think, again, let's wait till the autumn and see what he comes up with.
So he's also had the handicap of he got a hospital pass from Darragh O'Brien.
That's it. It's a hospital pass. That's the right word for it.
Okay, and then
the opposition.
No, we haven't finished with the cabinet. We forgot about the government's boot boy, the bruiser, Patrick O'Donovan. The man who has managed to been apparently on the outsides with Simon Harris now to been maybe one of his closest confidants. The man who has taken on the Arts Council, who expresses his frustration with RTE, who denies responsibility for the leaks in relation to An Post, and who...
So what mark are you giving Patrick?
Well, we want to see. I mean, is he all tough talk and no action?
So what mark are you giving him?
4.
Yeah, I'd agree with 4. Situation is, it's that department is a bit of a basket case. It's a lightweight department. A lot of the utilities, like RTE, are more dominant than the department itself. Look, he's throwing shapes. He wants to make
jumping on the ghost of the Greens.
And he loves jumping on anything that'll get him a bit of attention. He is Simon Harris's biggest mate. His tenure is secure. But put it like this: are we going to see something substantive? Let's see. His real crossroads will come when the 3-year package to bail out RTE is over. Is he going to double down on that, or is he going to walk away from that? And that'll test his mettle.
Yeah, I mean, that again is, we've already seen that RTE is behind in relation to implementing the cost-cutting measures. It's blaming the government. It says that the failure to sign off on the funding and to release the money meant that they couldn't get going on the redundancy packages as quickly as they were supposed to, which I think is... generous to itself in saying that, and there was fault on the government's part, but I still think RTE is not moving with sufficient speed if you look at all of the things that are happening internationally in relation to the extraordinary changes in broadcasting. And there'll be a bigger crisis coming down the road for RTE in the next few years. What about the opposition?
2 junior ministers have come out. Robert Troy, I think, is doing a good job. He's done a bit on insurance. He's doing stuff on financial services. He's in the Department of Finance. I think he's done well. And I think John Cummins is showing potential as Minister for Planning. He's certainly showing an eagerness.
Minister for shacks in the back garden.
Well, put it like this: it's better to have a shack than no shack, in my opinion. So I think...
Even if it means maybe if your family comes in and takes over the big house, Ivan, and puts you out in a log cabin in the back, you'll be happy with that?
Well, I don't think that'll be happening. But anyway...
you see what might happen with other people. You see, that's the thing,
But the point is, those two have caught my... Thomas Byrne would also be in a line for a jump up if there's a reshuffle of promotion of people down the road. In terms of...
Sorry, what about your great friend Micheál Healy-Rae, who only a couple of weeks ago you were promoting the possibility of him for presidency?
Yeah, Micheál Healy-Rae is actually making an impression in forestry. He has a lot more to do. He has to shift the dial in relation to planting levels. He inherited 3 or 4 years of forestry crop destroyed by Storm Owen. But put it like this: Micheál Healy-Rae is a doer. Okay, and I think that he is showing that, and he's not disappeared. Some junior ministers seem to have disappeared. Can I tell you who I think is the TD of the year?
Who?
Alan Kelly. I think Alan Kelly...
AK-47.
Yes, I think he has done really well on the whistleblower issue. I think, the whole Evan Fitzgerald, we've covered on this.
Yes.
I think he has used his stature as a former minister, along with Michael McDowell, and they have raised serious questions in the public interest, and I think they deserve commendation. And again, before we go to the opposition, a couple of backbenchers caught my eye. Barry Ward, I think, is starting to show signs of progress, and Catherine Arda is starting to show signs. So that's within the government parties. And then there's some newbies, I think, like Albert Dolan and so on, who have potential.
What about the opposition? Because we've mentioned Mary Lou McDonald earlier on in this podcast, and there's no doubt it's been very noticeable that Sinn Féin has decided to take an extremely aggressive position in relation to opposition. It reminds me in some respects of when Fianna Fáil were in opposition in the 80s under Charlie Haughey, where everything the government did, no matter what it was absolutely lambasted. And of course, as soon as they got into power in 87, they've just continued on and doubled down on everything that the Gareth Fitzgerald government had done. I'm thinking of things like the New Ireland Agreement, which they embraced, the health cuts, which they actually made far deeper than the previous government had ever dared. I wonder if Sinn Féin ever got into power, if they got into power in 29 after the next election, if they would do a reversal on things and what they've been saying now. And is it clever politics in that you oppose everything? Is that what oppositions are supposed to do, even if they secretly agree or are not particularly plussed by what's going on, they still decide that they're going to hammer on it? Or does it actually have the potential to be just ignored, that there might be a part of the electorate that suddenly starts thinking, there they go again, they're just banging on about everything? And given that, you know, I'm not a big fan of opinion polls, but some of the most recent opinion polls have suggested an ebbing in support for Sinn Féin, which I think you can only put down to that people are just maybe getting a little bit bored of hearing all the same negativity.
Well, I'll criticise Sinn Féin for some of their policies, such as apartment sizes and things that are just anti-investment. I think the left can be criticised for that, but I will not criticise Sinn Féin or Mary Lou or Pearse Doherty for doing their job, which is to oppose the government, to make the government stand to count. And they do have this kind of flamethrower routine on the floor of the Dáil. The flames aren't really singeing, but sometimes they do get up the nose of Micheál Martin and that kind of thing. So I have no difficulty.
But that's because you're deeply imbued in the game of politics, right?
It's their job. It's their job.
But is that what
their job is? Not to be reasonable and to be nice. Their job is the clue is in the title. It's called opposition.
I know that, but is it the thing that does it actually catch the attention of the electorate? Does it impress the electorate?
Well, put it like this. They always said the toughest job in Irish politics is leader of the opposition. So I would cut her some slack on that. But put it like this. They cannot be criticised for doing their job. I think one of their biggest problems is that they've had people in the same portfolio. That is unsustainable right up to 2029. In other words, if David Cullinane is going to be in health and Owen O'Brien's in housing and Pearse Doherty's in finance, and you've actually nearly had a decade of the same spokesmanship, it will appear stale.
Okay, what about the other political parties?
Well, I've told you about Holly Cairns. I just think it's just illogical what's happening there. If you want to drive that party, like Socktime's made big games. They're a relatively young party. Labour.
Sorry. You know, it's a marathon, not a sprint. It's going to be much more important for Holly Cairns to be around when you're coming towards the next election rather than the first year of 5. This is the perfect time for her to be off with her child. Ivana
Bacik is pretty lacking. You know, I spoke about Alan Kelly. I think Ivana lacks impact.
Labour are not going to bring Alan Kelly back, are they?
No. What I'm saying is this, that number one, it was quite clear that Ivana wanted Labour to row in behind Catherine Connolly. She couldn't bring her party with her. They met Catherine Connolly. Not impressed. That's not shown to me a lot of authority. So Ivana, I think that, you know what I mean, she did well in the election itself. Maybe she's just too polite, too legalistic background. I don't know. She just lacks a lot of the kind of gut that Mary Lou has. And put it like this, the left has become a really disparate, competitive place with, 4 or 5 brands. That's before you get to our hero of our times, Peadar Tobin and other people. So the fact of the matter is a confused mind doesn't buy there. There is no real progress on left unity. But always be aware of this, that when you look at government formation, Labour is the preferred choice of FF and FG, number one by far in terms of... so Labour have a route to government.
Okay. And then the hybrid opposition government, what about the independents? Okay, some of them are supportive of government, some aren't.
Independent Ireland, bit hit and miss. They seem to lack a kind of professionalism. They do represent rural Ireland.
Do they? Well, they do. They're elected. So
yeah, no, and you know what? They are kind of salt of the earth country people and all that good stuff. But are they, like, again, it's a very crowded space. I mean, like, when I look at polls broadly, like 14% say they approve of the government. But when you say, they're kind of all right, it goes up to another 36. That's 50% are broadly looking at full employment, looking at income growth, looking at GDP growth of 3.4% and saying, it could be worse.
Well, yeah, only 2 weeks ago you were talking about recession, that started
No, so that may still emerge. You know what I'm trying to say is that half the electorate are giving the government some sort of indifferent okay pass. Like, let's be clear about this. We're now entering a period. This is what I was telling you about the podcast. There was a time of heightened interest between the local and the national elections. Like, politics was in fifth gear.
But our numbers are going up all the time,
Politics is
Ivan.
in second gear.
Yeah, and yet there is a public interest in there.
There's a dormant nature to Irish politics now. And I can't make it any sexier than it is. And a lot of them are just plain boring.
Are you trying to undermine our podcast, are you?
No, I'm just calling it as it is. This is not the most riveting time for Irish politics. We're heading into the sort of 9 weeks of our summer recess. Well, put it like it's an important time for the government to do stuff.
Oh, absolutely.
But for politics.
But sorry, this is what I suppose I'm going to come to, is that, you know, okay, the game of politics and the sort of like the Punch and Judy show in the Dáil is off.
It's like a water break in the...
Yeah, but the real world impacts are still there, in that the government is facing all of the issues in relation to Trump's tariffs, and we're recording this in advance of knowing whether we have another taco trade from the Big Don as to whether the 1st of August...
15% seems to be emerging now.
Yeah, or 30% or whatever. So we've recorded this in advance of your departure to Goodwood for the horse racing, so we don't know the outcome of that.
Much more exciting than Irish politics at the moment.
But, so there was all of that at play, and there's still the big issue, and I think this is the overall issue for this government, is that, and we've also had last week, we had the National Development Plan being brought out on the Summer Economic Statement. But the whole thing is, it's delivery. We have a government that just keeps talking about plans and processes and ambitions and aspirations and things we can do and things we can't do, but they don't just do them.
Which is actually what I wanted to conclude on, which is, whatever about the political players, there is an evident stagnation in the permanent government, in the civil service, in the delivery side of it. And unless the government can overcome that malaise, because we've more civil servants than we've ever had before, that arm wrestle needs to have results.
Well, do you remember last year, Eoin O'Brien got in trouble when he criticised individual civil servants and implied that if he was in power, he would change things and stuff like that. And then he was forced to backtrack and apologise, almost like the civil servants were untouchable. They shouldn't be.
No.
The likes of the politicians, the Eoin O'Brien should not have apologised. He should not have backtracked. He should have stuck to his guns. We better leave it there. Thank you very much for being with us on this latest edition of Path to Power. Ivan will be back next week, so we will have a live podcast. Well, not live, but a live recording. Or I'm not even going to try and explain it. But there is more. We also have, for subscribers, we have this special interview series. You already would have had the first opportunity to hear one with Mandy Johnson, former government press secretary. It's still available if you want to go and get that, if you want to go back as a subscriber. But we have others as well. Fascinating interviews with the likes of Paschal Taggart and Mark Mellett coming up this weekend and next weekend. And then we'll have more as well. A special interview series for subscribers. So you can get that if you go to pathtopower.com, and the details will be there. Or actually, wherever it is you get your podcasts, be it on Spotify, Apple or whatever, if you're there, you can very easily get into the link and you can subscribe there as well. So until the next time, from me, Matt Cooper.
From me, Ivan Yates.
Thank you very much for being with us.